No, the Halifax real estate market hasn't crashed yet. And I know that a lot of you watching are probably thinking, well, then it's coming in 2024. But wait, isn't that what everybody was saying this time last year about the 2023 real estate market? If you're curious about what I think is going to happen in 2024, then you can check out my predictions video up top in the corner here. But in today's video, I'm going to dive into the stats and I'm going to give you an in-depth review on the 2023 year in the Halifax real estate market. So these stats are for all of HRM residential home sales, and some of these numbers are pretty crazy and some things we haven't seen in the HRM in decades. So it's pretty interesting. So I'm going to dive right into this and I'm going to talk about prices, sales, market time, interest rates, market conditions, and much, much more. But just before I get into it, if you're new here, my name's Andrew Stevens, and I've been a realtor in Halifax for 9.5 years. And if you're looking to be educated on the Halifax real estate market, then you're in the right place. So hit that subscribe button and hit that like button. And if you want to book a call or a meeting with me to chat about the market, you can do so anytime in the Calendly link below in my description at a time when it's convenient for you. All right, so let's start off with the big one. This one is price. So the average price in HRM last year in 2023 was $549,610. So just under $550,000. And it was up 2.6% from this time last year. This is a 50% increase since 2020. So if I'm looking at this table right now on the screen, this is the last 10 years in the Halifax real estate market in the HRM. So some pretty stagnant years around 2014, 2015, 2016. And then of course in 2019, it started to ramp up as inventory came down. And then in 2020 was the pandemic, the start of the pandemic, and things really took off from there, as you know, especially if you've been following along on this channel. So since 2020, we've had a 50% increase in the price points, but last year we just saw a small increase of 2.6%. And to put things into perspective for you, these increases that we saw in 2020, 2021, and 2022 were huge, because if I look at the data from 1980 all the way up to 2020, so a 40-year stretch, the average increase year over year for that 40-year period was 5% per year. So these increases in 2020 of 14.8%, 2021 of 25.6%, and then 2022 of 16.3% are huge compared to what we're used to seeing in the Halifax real estate market. So this 2.6 increase last year in 2023 is a lot more within the realm of what I would consider a normal year in the Halifax real estate market. So moving on to the number of sales that we saw in the HRM, in 2023, we had 4,791 sales, and this was down 13.2% from the year before in 2022. So to be clear, this is the number of sales. It has nothing to do with the price point. This is literally the number of homes that were sold last year in the HRM. And this is the lowest number that we've seen in HRM since 1995. Now, a huge part of this is obviously to do with the interest rates and the overall market conditions, but also the number of new listings that we saw in the HRM last year, which was very minimal, but I'm going to get into that all in a minute. Now moving on to market time, so how long it's taking on average to sell a home. And in 2023, the average days on market was 28 days. But let's just hold on for a minute, because that's very skewed for some listings that were on the market for a very long time before they sold. So if I look a little bit closer at the data, 49% of homes sold in 2023 were sold in 7 days or less. 60% of homes sold in 2023 were sold in 14 days or less. So again, this was very skewed, and to be honest, it wasn't really a stat that I paid a ton of attention to in 2023. I was more so focused on the market conditions and what price points were different than others and how much inventory we had at different price points. So it's speaking of market conditions, let's get into it, because 2023 was really the tale of two markets. So overall in the HRM, we're in a seller's market. We have more demand than the supply that we currently have. So for all of HRM, the current inventory is sitting right around 3.2 months. So it's a seller's market, but it's inching back towards a balanced market. Now, what I mean by the tale of two markets is that it really depends on what price point you are looking in, and that's going to really determine your experience, whether you're trying to buy a home in that market or sell a home in that market. So everything above $750,000 is a buyer's market. We're currently sitting at about 7.7 months of listing inventory. So in a buyer's market, we have a lot more supply than the demand that we currently have. Now, on the flip side, everything below $750,000 is currently a seller's market. We're sitting at about 2.3 months of listing inventory. So in the below $750,000 price range, we have a lot more demand than the supply that we currently have. And even more extreme, if I look under $500,000, we only have about a month of listing inventory. So this is an extreme seller's market, and we really need a lot more inventory in this price range. So let's talk about competing offers, because I think this is something that a lot of people don't really grasp about the market, because on one hand, they know somebody that sold their house and they had 5 or 6 offers. And then on the other hand, maybe they had a friend that sold in a different neighborhood and they had no offers for 3 months while they had their house listed. And again, this comes back to the market conditions. Sometimes it's not apples to apples just because you're selling your home in HRM. It depends what you're selling, where it is, and what price point it is at. But in general, in the HRM in 2023, 44% of the homes sold for over the asking price, for an average of just over $31,000 over the asking price. So this is basically saying that almost 50% of the time in the HRM in 2023, you would end up as a buyer in a multiple offers situation, which oftentimes pushes those price points over the asking price because it is a bidding war. And although there were some low points and some high points to these numbers throughout the year, the average amount over the asking price remained relatively consistent at kind of the high 20,000s or low 30,000s over the asking price each month. And in terms of the percentage of homes selling over the asking price, this also remained pretty consistent for the most part, coming in most months in between 40 and 50% of the sales going over the asking price. So moving on, let's talk about interest rates. And this is obviously something we need to talk about. It was a very hot topic in the news and in the real estate world in 2023. So in 2023, we started the year off at 4.25% in terms of the overnight lending rate. And then right away in January, we saw a 0.25% increase, so 25 basis points. And then we saw 2 more increases of 25 basis points each in June and in July. And when the one in January happened, it didn't really slow the market down too much, to be honest. But when the 2 came in June and July back to back, things really started to cool off in the Halifax real estate market, especially at those higher price points. Again, everything under $500,000 was still pretty busy, but everything over that, or everything over $600,000 or $700,000, was a lot slower, especially once we saw these rates go up. So overall, in 2023, we saw rate hikes of 75 basis points to the overnight lending rate. All right, so let's move on to rentals. And honestly, this was another very, very hot topic in the news throughout 2023 and, well, the last few years, obviously. And I posted a video recently about the rent cap that kind of took off, and a lot of people were commenting and had some opinions on that, and that's all great. But for the 2023 year, rentals remained basically impossible. It's a disaster right now. The rent cap is still in effect, but if people are leaving their current leases, then they're going to be dealing with huge increases on the rent. So if they have to move for a different location or size or whatever that might be, then the rent cap is going to be released from that unit. So not only will the rent go way up in that unit, but then when that tenant moves to another 2-bedroom unit, for example, they're probably going to be paying way more than they were at their old spot. Now, this year in 2024, that rent cap has increased to 5% annual increase. So that just happened a couple days ago, but last year it was still 2%. Now, most of the rent prices we're seeing are insane, and this is hugely to do with the lack of supply that we have in our market. We have way too much demand for the little amount of supply that we have. We have way too many people coming to Nova Scotia based on how many homes we're building every year, including apartments and every kind of housing unit out there. And honestly, I don't think this is going to change anytime soon. And I said that in my predictions video for 2024. And honestly, you could just take that and copy and paste it for the next 10 years, because the rental market is probably not going to change drastically anytime soon, in my opinion, strictly based on the amount of people we have looking for places that just don't exist. All right, so let's move on to new listings, because this is something I talked about earlier, and this is something that really played a huge role in the lack of sales that we had in the HRM. So last year in 2023, we had 6,250 new listings in the HRM. Now, this is the lowest that we've seen since 2003, and it was down 15% since 2022. Now, if I look back historically, which this graph is showing you, the number of new listings is really, really low at 6,250. Like I said, it's the lowest since 2003. But if I look back even further, so we had 2003 and then a really low year in 2001. And if I keep going back year after year after year, it's the lowest it's been since 1981 after those 2 years in 2001 and 2003. So, for reference, the average number of new listings to hit the market over the last 10 years every year in HRM has been about 9,300. And again, in 2023, we only had 6,250 for the year. All right, so there's just a couple more stats that I want to talk about, and one of them is the list to sale price ratio. So, what I mean by this ratio is what are the sale prices versus the listing price? So, in other words, if you have a listing that is at $500,000 and it sells for $500,000, well, that's 100% sale to list price ratio. But if I go for $100,000 versus a $500,000 list price, then that's an 80% sale to list price ratio. Now, if you look at the graph here, the average last year was slightly over 100%, so 100.6%. So what I mean by that is that homes in HRM on average are selling over the asking price. Now, a big part of this is because the strategy has changed. So if we look back to the start of this graph right here, at the start of 2022, we were at almost 125% of the list price. But that was mainly because at that point in the market, we were still grossly underpricing listings. But now in 2023, we're pricing things more accurately to where they should be and more accurately close to market value. So in other words, if a listing is thought to be worth about 510,000, for example, maybe you'll list at 525 or 519 or maybe 510. And a lot of times maybe somebody will go aggressive and they'll go 499.9 to try to generate a lot of interest, keep it under that $500,000 level. And then from there, they might get multiple offers, pushing it up to 510, 515, or maybe 520. So this is why it's right around 100, because right now the common listing strategy that we're seeing is pretty much to list right around market value. Now, that's not to say that some places didn't sell 100 grand over the asking price, because it certainly does happen. But oftentimes, that's not to say that it sold 100 grand over the market value. It's to say that it sold 100 grand over the listing price. So sometimes people are still listing very, very aggressively. To be honest, I don't really know why, but that's happening in some cases. And last but certainly not least, let's talk about the number of showings on average per listing. So in 2023, we hovered right around 7 showings per listing on average. We had a little bit more to start the year, and then it kind of tapered off a little bit as rate hikes started coming and the market started slowing down. And last year we had even more. Last year was sitting right around 10 to 12 consistently, and the low months were more like around 9 showings per active listing. So the other thing I want to talk about is back in 2022, just for reference. Again, if you look at this graph, at the start of 2022, we were averaging about 23 or 24 showings per listing. So we're talking 3 times the amount that we averaged this year. So things definitely have slowed down. A big reason to this is the price and so on. But again, it's just good to know this so you know what to expect if you're going to be listing your property. So there you have it. I hope you found some of these stats interesting. And if you did, all I ask is that you hit that like button and you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my future content. And that'll help push this out to more people like you who may be interested in seeing videos about the Halifax real estate market and the stats and what's happening on the ground level. And until next time, thank you for watching. I really appreciate your support. And don't forget to check out my predictions video on my channel as well. Thanks for watching and have a great day.